Okay. I think that's everything. Okay. All right. It is Friday, July 28th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Central Time, and this is Friday afternoon streaming 6. Uh, Missed last week because I just had some stuff going on in the family. This week, though, we're here in the town of Grey Ditch, where the next lore video is based. And it's actually not that big a town. It's a community of really just 3 occupied houses by the time you come around. And in fact, one of the houses has been completely unoccupied, and one of the houses is down to a single individual, and the other one is as well, but it was at a single individual at the time anyway. Let me go ahead and turn on the opacity there for the HUD. Okay. Alright, so this will be the 3rd video I've done in Fallout 3. The first one was on, which one? Vault 92? I can't remember exactly. I think 92. The one with the SWA Stradivarius. Then the second one was on Megaton, and now we're doing this one here on Grey Ditch. Yes, tunnel snakes rule. Welcome to the stream. Lord have mercy. So the thing here that I'm just generally talking about, because there's not really that much you can tell about this community before the war. Like, you can tell that was... I would say that they were relatively well off. Like, not poor, not rich. Just fairly middle class. And my guess is that most of the people that lived here worked in the service industry in DC itself, or perhaps here in, well, Grey Ditch is basically in the outskirts of Arlington in the real world. Specifically, it's close to Arlington National Cemetery. Oh, that thing's not dead yet. There we go. It's close to Arlington National Cemetery. Welcome, Cal L. Avila. And yes, Gary. Gary! The Arlington National Cemetery is right in here. So that's part of how you know this is part of Arlington here. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pre-war, but most of it's post-war, and most of it really is of a time just before the Soul Survivor comes out of the vault. Not Soul Survivor. Lone Wanderer comes out of the vault. Soul Survivor's still sleeping for another 10 years. Hey, Night Spearhead. And so basically, yeah, it's just the story of the Wilkes family, the Brandeis family. I think it's the Brandeis family. And Dr. Lesko. So far I've got 3 notes that I put into the script. The script is basically, it's almost done. All I got to do is finish filling out the Fallout history. I was originally hoping I'd be done with the script a couple days ago, then I realized, no, if this is a settlement, I have to cover this as I typically cover settlements, which includes basically the area around it and stuff like that. And so I had to, good lord, these things are, it's first of all pitch black, because that's the way the nights are in Fallout 3. Second of all, these things are so low to the ground you can't really see where they are until they're very close. So yeah, I'm covering the general surroundings of it as well. I've decided that at some point in the future I'm going to do a full video on the metro system in Fallout 3. This is a new character. I had to make a new character in order to do this because every other character I had already had completed the quest Those, which is the quest here in Grey Ditch. But I'm definitely going to do a full coverage of the Fallout 3 metro system just because it is so freaking crazy. To write a script, it depends. So, for example, Vault 85, last week's video. That one took me about 4 hours in an evening to get that one done. But that's a very contained story. Basically, just cover the entire place. Paladin Brandis from Fallout 4 is kind of the Brandis family. Oh, that'd be an interesting. It'd be interesting. I mean, the only thing about that is that the Brandis family in Fallout 3 is from Navarro, California. Or at least that's where they were most recently before they came here, because they Mr. Brandis was part of the Enclave at Navarro before they deserted and came here. But in terms of writing a script, so like, again, 85, very self-contained story. It only takes place within Vault 85 itself. So yeah, that was a quick one. That one, it took more time to film it, really, than anything. Yeah, Father was Enclave. But when we're talking about things like the Brother to Steel, that one took like a month working constantly on that one because there's so much raw lore to go over. I'm going to wait until daytime so we can actually see things here. But there was so much lore to put together that it was seriously, and it's not like I was working on this thing 8 hours a day, but there were definitely weekend days where I was doing 8 hours a day on the script. But usually during the week, I'd either do like an hour a day or something like that working on that thing. But yeah, it entirely depends on the scope of the material being covered. But yeah, so again, just got to finish the script for Greyditch. And then so far, let's see, what's the next video going to be? Well, again, it depends partially on when the next Mothman Equinox event is. But let's see what the poll currently says on the... Which, by the way, if you're not part of the Discord has the vote for this. Currently, the vote is 4 in favor of what happened to the Settlers of Foundation to 1 in favor of what happened to Hallucigen in Fallout 4. Which... I decided I wanted to cover Hallucigen before covering the Gunners. That was originally going to be the next thing I covered was the Gunners, but if I cover Hallucigen, that'll be closer. I'll be closer to being ready to cover the Gunners. You wanted to start a ska band called Gary 43. This is Dr. Lesko's shack. My character here is too low level to unlock it, so I'll just use the console commands. Yeah, this is where he had his Protectron, his computer here. One of the notes I have in the video, I'm not going to share everything because I want some of that stuff to be fresh when you all get it. And it's going to very likely be Monday that I release this video. I'll hopefully finish it tomorrow, but I'm trying to get to where I have an actual release date. But one of the notes is on all the doctors in the Wasteland when we're 200 years on from there being really... any realistic institutions out there that would be conferring doctorates upon anybody. So it's kind of funny to think that most of these doctors are people that just started calling themselves doctor. Like Dr. Lesko, for example. I mean, you could definitely say that groups like the Institute, which are directly descended from colleges, would still be able to legitimately confer such things. But I would say most of the Wasteland doctors out there simply, I don't know, found an old book on anatomy and started doing some first aid. Good lord, these things are... Well, first of all, I'm using a 10mm pistol, so it's not going to do much damage. I wonder if Oppenheimer developed a bomb in the Fallout universe. It's interesting, I don't know. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we know that the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so at the very least, the same bombs were developed and dropped. So one would have to assume maybe they were, that it was Oppenheimer. I mean... it points in that direction. I've talked about this before. I don't believe that there is a actual schism. I think it's 2 different universes. Fallout universe and our universe. So, it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, well, in this version of the schism, Oppenheimer was never born or whatever, but no. Okay. There's that. So, yeah. The closest one here is, the closest metro station to this is Marigold Station, which of course features into the overall story of those and Greyditch itself. But, again, I'm definitely going to cover the entire metro system because, like, the number of times in filming in Fallout 3 when I've just been needing to get, like, a single shot of a bomb crater somewhere, and I then have to spend 2 hours finding my way through the sewers and the metro system, I want to know it by, like, the back of my hand. So I'm going to end up creating a full map of the system with all the stations, all the entrances, where they are, and all that stuff, and I'll create a video to guide through it. We just did an Apocalypse World game where after the movie premiere, where the Trinity test entered the world. Yeah, that's an interesting... There were scientists involved, to my understanding. I've not yet seen Oppenheimer. I do plan to see it at some point. But... there were people that were afraid that the reaction that they were going to generate with the test would not stop and just keep on going. Well, there is a transistor. The transistor was invented in the Fallout universe just later. But the reason I specifically say that it's not the same universe is because the science does not work the same. Specifically here, and this, yeah, this is a great weapon to use against something that shoots flame at you. The reason I say it's a different universe is because biology reacts completely differently. Oh, yeah, I'm dead. Unless... God mode. Take that, Fire Angel Soldier. The transistor, yeah, there is... I remember seeing somewhere the transistor was invented in the Fallout universe, simply much later, though. Which is why they also used, had to continue using vacuum tubes. You know, the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I have a degree in an engineering field, but I feel like my electrical part of my engineering training was so it was such a it was so poor, I guess. And my vocabulary is doing great today, right now as well. My electrical training was so poor that I decided to create my own encyclopedia of electronics and electronic terms and stuff like that, and so I actually did study the vacuum tube. It's a really, really interesting piece of technology. And from my understanding, there's a thought that a vacuum tube would be more likely to survive a nuclear apocalypse than a transistor, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. That's just a speculation that I've seen, and I don't know that anyone has ever actually fully tested that sort of a thing. And I don't think anybody really wants to test that sort of a thing. So... whether or not... So, my point in saying that it's a different universe and there's no divergence is that there is a divergence where things changed. Things were significantly different in the Fallout universe versus our universe. But the reason that it's significantly different is because the laws of physics are different. So, in the real world, if something gets hit with radiation, the mutation that potentially causes is much more likely to be lethal than it is to cause a positive change. So... in the Fallout universe, though, it seems far more likely that the mutation is going to be something positive. That, to me, seems to be a fairly dramatic difference right there. It seems to me that the reason why there is a significant divergence between the history of the Fallout universe and the history of our universe from about the 1950s on is because radiation works differently in the Fallout universe, and that's not a significant factor in world history until we get to the point where humans are actually using radiation on a much more regular basis. And by radiation, I mean nuclear radiation in the form of gamma radiation, because radiation technically includes a lot of things, including, I believe, visible light. Well, no, that's a wave. Radiation, though, is alpha, beta, gamma particles. Gamma waves, alpha, beta particles, which I didn't even notice this until someone pointed it out recently, which is really dumb of me to not notice this. But alpha particles are just helium atoms. I don't know why I didn't notice that before when it's blatantly the case. Yeah, the science in the story does have you suspend disbelief, but again, I generally like to try to view the science in any world and try to figure out the way that it works. Well, so you have to consider where these games take place. So, like you're saying right there, Fallout 76, the flora is abundant and alive, but 200 years later in Fallout 3 and 4, almost everything is dead. So, Appalachia was only hit twice. And that's one of those things where it's like they don't even really talk about it in the game. There's simply 2 craters that you can find in Appalachia that were likely bomb craters. So yeah, it likely got hit by some fallout, but at the same time, it was relatively unscathed by actual direct strikes. Whereas DC would be one of the most hit places in the entire world. Tim Kaine says FEV mutated the double helix to a quadruple helix. Again, that's one of those things where it's like... it's an interesting thing to consider, and if that is the way that it works here, then that's really cool. But that's one of those things where it's like... kind of like the MacGuffin sort of a thing, where it's like... in Mass Effect, Element Zero exists, and it makes everything that takes place in the Mass Effect universe work. In the same way that FEV kind of works that same sort of way here in the... Fallout universe. But again, the real... If there was a divergence point, if at some point in the long distant past the Fallout universe and our universe was the same universe, then I don't know why it is that would really only start shifting around the 1950s. At least that's at least everything that we've seen so far. And of course, it could simply be the case that that's just as far back as they decided to go, starting the game worlds, having the game world's most important point be in 2077. So it's like, do they really need to go back more than 150, 120, 170 years? 120, jeez. My math's not there. At the same time, my vocabulary is not either. I don't know. I don't know what Oxhorn's view on that is.
What's this funny suction hose for?
That's Brian Wilkes, who's hanging out in the Pulaski Preservation Shelter next door. Yeah, I need to look more into Mothership Zeta at some point and see what exactly the aliens had to do with the apocalypse, if anything at all. There's Brian Wilkes and his little fallout shelter. These things are such a scam. They're hilarious, though, really, when it comes right down to it. Because it's one of those things, also, it doesn't even make sense as a scam. Like, you build this thing, I don't know how much it costs you, maybe $20,000, $30,000, like, minimum to install this sort of a thing? And then you're getting, what, a quarter out of it? A dollar, maybe, in coins? And that's only if the apocalypse happens. Who's coming to collect those coins? I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a very comical little thing they added into the Fallout universe, but it really makes no sense at all. So, let's see. So yeah, if after this I end up covering the Settlers Foundation, then I'll have to talk to those people more and figure out more of their backstories. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't think that there would be as big a story to the Settlers, or not the Settlers, the Raiders of the Crater until I really started investigating it. Because there's a lot of, like, little things that they say that actually lead you to larger conclusions. So I'll have to talk to those folks more, because, honestly, I have not really spent that much time with the Settlers of Foundation. It's one of those things where I feel like I've talked about this before, but I played a lot of World of Warcraft back in the early 2000s, the 2010s, and I got so sick of dailies that I just don't like dailies anymore in any context. So it's one of those things where when most of your interaction with the Settlers of Foundation and the Raiders of the Crater are dailies, it's not something I'm terribly interested in. Now you know what a TV dinner feels like. Yeah. I do like the concept that the TV dinners of the Fallout universe are still edible because of the radiation. Now, like, when you can something, the whole goal there is to get rid of all the bacteria within the product and basically leave it airtight. Which, of course, means that, you know, over time the product's still probably going to degrade, just not from bacteria or fungal or viral agents inside of it. And not viral. Viral requires a living cell. But there's an interesting concept, which is that in the bombs, with the gamma radiation, they potentially killed any remaining microorganisms that were living in those TV dinners and stuff like that. Phone booths from Fallout 3 and 4 don't look turn of the century. Much too sci-fi. Well, that's something I've always kind of been interested in, is there's this mid-century cultural aspect that the Fallout universe took on, and they decided to, like, you know, design everything to look like the 1950s and stuff like that. But at the same time, they did have higher level technology. And so it's one of those things with, like, phones. Is it something where they would decide to make those things look like mid-century phones, or would they decide to actually use the technology that they had on hand? And it's something I don't know. And it's one of those things, too. It's, like, such a funny part of the past, where when you watch the Alien movies, and you see the computers they have, and they're all those 1970s computers with, like, green text and no graphics, or very few graphics at all. And it's sort of the same thing, where it's like, you look at, like, the future as envisioned within the Fallout universe, and yeah, people have Pip-Boys. That would probably be the closest thing to a smartphone that anybody had, but there's still all these phones out on the corners and stuff like that. So you say, Todd Howard says in an interview there was a secret in Fallout 4 no one has discovered. So in terms of who dropped the first bomb, it has always made more sense to me the idea that the Chinese did it than the Americans. And not always, but ever since Fallout 4, when basically you find out that the Americans had invaded the mainland of China. In fact, I think that it's also mentioned here as well in Fallout 3, but I can't remember. I can't remember specifically here, but they do talk about Americans fighting in China in Fallout 4 at the very least. Isn't there also talk about like the Gobi Desert campaign here, or isn't that in New Vegas? I can't remember, but regardless, if the American troops were in China with power armor, then it very much why would the United States launch nukes against China as a first strike when they were already winning the battle on the ground? The Chinese seem they would have much more of a reason to fire nukes because they're basically about to lose. So the interesting thing about the big ship, and I think was it Tim Kaine talking about this? I think he's the one who recently created his own his own YouTube channel and just generally talked about game development. But in the process, he also talked about Fallout lore. And part of it was the original plan had nothing to do with the Enclave and the ship, and that's what and there was no. That's not what the Vault experiments are for until Fallout 2. Which is always an interesting thing to consider is the evolution of the lore over time, and that's always one of those things too where it's like, when people get upset about something that, when the lore changes, it's like, can't believe Bethesda made that change. It's like, Obsidian were making changes in their day too, or Interplay, or whoever they were at the time. It's like, the lore changes over time, and part of that is we're living in this aftermath of the bombs. We don't know everything that happened. We're having to piece together things from little bits and pieces that we find all over the place. And not only that, even in games like Fallout, where you're getting a chunk of California, Fallout 2, chunk of California and Nevada, Fallout 3, where you're here in the Capital Wasteland, you're getting small pieces of the country, when the entire country, it's one of the largest countries in the world with the third largest population, at least in the real world. So how is it that you think with this small section of the country, with a little bit of lore that you can find, that you know everything about the lore of the world that you're existing in? It's just hilarious. So, let's see. So after I cover Settlers of Foundation, the thing is going to be Nipton, Hallucinogen, or something here in Fallout 3. Let's see, anybody have any suggestions for what you'd like to see covered in Fallout 3? On a note, if anybody is actually currently trying to make comments there, I want to say that I am currently listening to an audiobook version of the collected works of H.P. Lovecraft. It's a lot easier for me to listen to books today because of the amount of time I spend working on stuff and working on videos here. I don't listen to that stuff while I'm working on videos and stuff like that, but it's just a hell of a lot easier to do that when you're out walking the dog or working or driving. But I'm definitely going to be covering... I'm going to first cover the Mothman cult in Fallout 76 and their connections to the eldritch horrors that exist within the deeps and within the Lucky Hole mine. But along with that, I'm definitely also going to eventually cover the entire set of Lovecraftian elements that you find within the Fallout universe, especially since Fallout 3 and on. You don't want to know who dropped the bomb. Well, it's one of those things where it's like, it is absolutely left ambiguous, but to me, logically speaking, it makes the most sense that the Chinese would have been the first to send a bomb. But back to Lovecraft. The Dunwich building, the Dunwich Corporation, is definitely Lovecraftian. Of course, this character is too low level to have anything related to Dunwich. But in Fallout 4, even something as small as the Kingport's Lighthouse seems to me to be a reference to Lovecraft, because there's a town called Kingsport in Lovecraft country, or the version of Massachusetts that Lovecraft used in his fiction. This version of Kingsport is basically a version of Marblehead, which is a town just outside of Salem. And so in Fallout 4, you can go to the Kingsport Lighthouse, which again, there's no Kingsport in the real world, at least not anything in that area. But that's where Kingsport is located in the Lovecraftian fiction. Apple Asia. Oh. That's neat. That's neat if that's the Easter egg that nobody found. And that's one of those things where you definitely have to read it aloud for it to click in there. But yeah, again, Kingsport Lighthouse is Lovecraftian reference. There are so many of them that I'm finding as I've started listening to this stuff. Oh yeah, I just actually finished The Color Out of Space yesterday, and At the Mountains of Madness was the third story that I heard, and that one it's incredible. And it's the weird thing is like it was not well received from what I've read, but like such a great story going down to Antarctica and discovering this ancient civilization that existed millions of years before humanity. That's now been taken over. I don't want to ruin it for anybody that has not read it and wants to look into it. Kind of late to do a spoiler alert when we're talking about a book that was a story that was published 90 years ago, but still, seriously, go check it out if you haven't. Lovecraft's stuff is really interesting. He definitely has some, let's say, dated language, especially when it comes to race. But, yeah. Calls a lot of people mongrels, which, a bit rough. Yeah, The Color Out of Space, another really interesting one, though. Let's see. Yeah, don't mention his cat. You do not want to mention his cat. Let's see. What else was there? Okay. So, if you, so the Metro, that seemed to be the suggestion that I saw. I could definitely cover the Metro. That one's definitely going to take longer. But if I do set myself to it, I could probably get it done in a couple of weeks' time. The main thing with that, too, is I want to draw the maps up in order to really sell it. So, let's go over here real quick, because there actually is a map of the Metro. Drives me crazy trying to run in Fallout 3 because then you realize you are running, and as soon as you press shift you start walking. There is the map of the Metro. Now this is really very, very different from the real world Metro. Which is strange because the Boston Metro is actually fairly... It's a lot... I'll say at the very least, I have not investigated the Boston Metro 100%. But I will say that in Fallout 4, the Boston Metro is significantly closer to the real world one. I mean, like, even down to the point where the Medford Malden station is on the Orange Line, which is what it is on in the real world. Hope they expand upon the company that makes the Lone Wanderer motorcycle. Fallout needs a good Harley-Davidson analog. I think it would be interesting if they would introduce some vehicles into the Fallout universe. I mean, obviously, there is the car in Fallout 2. Lovecraft documentary floating around about Guillermo del Toro and Neil Gaiman. Yeah, I've heard that Guillermo del Toro wanted to make a movie of it, I think about a decade and a half ago at this point, and that basically nothing ever went anywhere with At the Mountains of Madness. But that I think that one would make a great movie or a great like limited TV show or something like that. But anyway, looking at this map here, there's only 3 lines, which... Let me see here real quick. Let's, alright. Let's go to the maps. Okay. I don't even know if it's going to show the metro lines on here. There we go, transit. Okay. Take a look at that. So, compare that, where you've got a blue line, an orange line, a yellow line, a green line, a red line, and you compare that to this. It is a very different map. Now, along with that, there's things on here like the plots station that doesn't even exist in the game. And it's also one of those things where it's like, what exactly is that reference to? I'm going to need to look into that more, because... From German, I just simply know that the word plots means square, like as in like a city square. So, I don't know. I don't know why that what that would be named for. But the other weird thing is, like, there are things like some of these stations are actual real world stations. Metro Central, L'Enfant, wow, Plaza. Tacoma is a real station. I think DuPont is a real station. So there are actual real stations here. I don't know why it is that they decided to make the metro such a jumbled mess, but again, I will definitely be covering this thing. I will map the entire thing out, draw maps of it up, and put the whole thing together. If you haven't seen it, I drew up full maps of the pit in Fallout 76, and along with that I drew maps of the foundry and of the trench, and those are, you can find links to them on those videos, and I've actually stored those maps on a Google Drive so you can view them whenever you need to. I'll do the same thing with these maps here. If you're interested, you can go ahead and check out those maps. But that's not going to be on the next video. At the very least, the next video is going to be very likely covering, like I said, the Settlers of Foundation. And the next one after that, well, I'm hoping, will be on Point Pleasant and the Mothman Cult in Fallout 76. So it's going to be Fallout 76-y for a while. So that might be most of August, if anything. And then my guess would be, in all honesty, that I'm probably not going to get anything done in September, given that Starfield is coming out. Not going to be abandoning Fallout lore by any means. So it might be one of those things where I have to try to prep those videos early so that I still have some Fallout lore that I can put out in September as well. Because I know that there are people that are going to not be interested in Starfield that are just coming here for Fallout lore, so I still want to make sure that absolutely that I'm still covering that, because I'm still interested in it. And that's one of the great things about making the videos, is that you learn about the story in the process of making the video yourself. So let's see, anything else to talk about here while we're still here in Greyditch? Talked about where it is in all likelihood in the real world. This is just a transient community where people kind of came in, lived here temporarily before they went on to go find somewhere better to live. Close enough to downtown that the small-scale raiders stayed away because they were afraid of the things that were nearby here. But it's also not terribly safe because those things are nearby here. I mean, they're right next to the Marigold Metro Station where these ants are coming from. They're also pretty close to downtown DC, which is right now a super mutant hellhole, but along with that there's also always going to be a feral ghoul problem whenever you're near a major city, so that's something you always have to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, by the time the Lone Wanderer exits the vault, there's 2 people left of the original 6, with the entire Brandis family being dead. It's funny that I guess he was listening to this in order to make sure that he would, like, hear anything about himself being mentioned, maybe, but, like, the fact that they can move all the way here from Navarro, California. They're, like, getting away from the Enclave. He fixes the radio, turns it on, and the first thing he hears is John Henry Eden. Oh, man. Oof. Yeah, there's Fred Wilkes. Unfortunately, seems like they lost his wife at some point in the distant past, or maybe not too distant past. It's not really talked about too much, simply that she's gone. Along with that, there is also the thing that comes from rescuing Brian and sending him to go live with his aunt,
It's kind of hard to breathe in this thing.
Vera Weatherly, where she lives off in Rivet City, or I believe you can send him to Big Town. I still have to film this stuff. The funny thing is, I filmed all of this stuff just a couple months ago when I was making my video on Megaton, and I don't remember some of the, the very small specifics, things like whether or not you can send him to Big Town. I believe you can, because he's an orphan, or if he goes to Little Lamplight. I think he would go to Little Lamplight, because I think he's still young enough. Yeah, he's definitely young enough. He would go to Little Lamplight, not Big Town. Let's see. Recently played through Far Cry 6. I don't know how many of y'all play the Far Cry series. I have played 3, 4, 5, New Dawn, and 6. I tried Primal, but it's just not for me. And I know that not everybody out there likes the Far Cry series because it's fairly formulaic and basically built along the same line as every Ubisoft game. But I will say that while I definitely like 5 more than 6, I think 6 was fairly well done, and I really liked Giancarlo Esposito's performance as the dictator Anton Castillo. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Atlantic City. Yeah, it's too bad that they didn't have him have any sort of, you know, energy weapon lying around. But he did have his gun behind the fridge, I think. Yeah, there it is. 32. God, the 32 in Fallout 3 at the very least is like the weakest freaking gun. He's got this thing for home defense against these ants, I guess. Or against raiders, I guess. Probably the Enclave coming for him. But this is like the weakest gun you can get in the game. It's ridiculous. I don't know why it is that they decided to make a 32, like, so freaking weak. But you compare the damage to even just the 10 mil. Oh, it's sad. He went to Megaton to buy this and apparently spent a bunch of money on it. I mean, I guess it's better than literally nothing, but not much. Yeah, not many revolvers with 5 chambers either. Yeah, no. It's definitely completely useless from the very beginning of the game. That's the strange thing. It's not like even something where it's like, okay, I'm just out of the vault. I'm up against some mole rats, some low-level raiders. This is my gun of choice. But, oh, it's just awful. Yeah, 10mm pistol's amazing by comparison. Like, let's see this thing in action. Alright, come on. Let's get to where I can see you. Come into the light. I'm invincible as it is, so you may just come into the light. Look at that. For a fire ant worker. Yeah, hunting rifle. I always love the hunting rifle. But it's much more fun in Fallout New Vegas when you can put a scope on it. Yeah, trying to take on a fire ant soldier with this. It's a good thing I've got infinite ammo. I don't have to reload, because otherwise this would have been like reload 8. Wild Bill's sidearm makes the 32 relevant, because at that point in the game, weapons are scarce in the pit. Okay, well, maybe. I don't remember too much of the pit in Fallout 3. I remember the general story of it, but not so much the gameplay. Other than collecting all that steel from the scrapyard and spending hours looking for the last piece of it. Yeah, New Jersey, I mean, it's got a prominent part to play in the American Revolution and all that stuff. It's just one of those things where it's like the Jersey Shore has definitely changed people's perceptions of New Jersey. Of course, like I feel like every piece of culture also located in New York also makes fun of New Jersey, so that also is going to color people's view of New Jersey. Like I was starting to rewatch Futurama for the first time in like a decade, and they're looking for apartments, and they come across one that looks beautiful, and they're like, "So what's wrong with this one?" It's like, "Oh, it's well, technically it is in New Jersey." And the next scene, not even one of these apartments is even remotely livable. Yes, this gun is as useful as a pencil in a hurricane. It's just a Jersey thing. Yeah, Fallout 4 though, I will say the gunplay in Fallout 4 is so much better than in 3 and New Vegas. And New Vegas is better than 3, and 4 is better than New Vegas. They're from Staten Island, huh? To shreds, you say. And what about his wife? Oh, to shreds, you say. Yeah, I'm really starting to enjoy laser weapons in Fallout 4 in the way I never really used to. Let's see. I don't know how much more there is to cover about this upcoming video without basically giving literally everything away. I will say I do have a point about the massive insects in that video, but I'm going to keep that to the video itself. The massive ants, I mean, but I also tie that into the massive insects, well, not insects, but the massive arthropods in general across the Fallout universe, from the ants to the radroaches to the scorpions, to the bloatflies, all those things that are enormous that you find within the Fallout universe. And I talk about the science behind it. So, hopefully you all will find that interesting. And then along with that, was there anything...
Stupid monsters. Can't get me in here.
A couple notes that I will mention real quick. You can get him to, with a quick little speech conversation with him, if you can convince him of this thing. I had to redo this like 8 times because I had a 45% chance of succeeding and failed like 7 times in a row. You can talk him into giving you the key to this trash bin. I'll just unlock it real quick so you can see what's in there. We got frag grenades, some meds, and a gun. In the past, I found 12 frag grenades, along with a pistol and some ammunition. Yeah, I saw that post he had. I will say that I think that the story of Fallout 76 before the Vault Resident or Vault Dweller, whatever you want to call him, emerges from the vault, I would say that that story gives New Vegas a run for its money. The funny thing about Fallout 4 is, like, I've not actually completed Fallout 4 to a canonical ending. I did the Fallout 4 ending where all the organizations are still intact and basically leaving each other alone. I always leave it to where basically the Minutemen are kind of in charge of things, but I don't destroy any of the organizations because I honestly believe that I will say this, the Institute has done a lot of evil things, but I think that if you could find some way to use their technology without destroying the Institute, it would really be a preferable way to go about doing things. Yeah, the Fire Ant Queen down in the subway is enormous. I think it's mainly due to the fact that when you talk about bugs, well, like nesting creatures and stuff like that, bees and ants and stuff like that, the queens are always much, much bigger than any other of the ants or bees or termites. Good lord. Seriously. Okay, I gotta get something better. Oh, that is useless. No, yeah, the world building in 76 is better than in any of the other Fallout games. I mean, the environmental storytelling and stuff like that. The world building is good in most games, but the way they tell the stories using the environment, using the nodes, the holotypes, the terminal entries is far superior to anything else. And again, I've talked about this before, they had to do it because there were no NPCs. Why am I going out? I was going to head in deeper here. Yeah, /kill definitely works great at killing the ants, but I was looking to use the console a little less than simply using God mode. So I've been to DC 3 times in my life. First time when I was a very young child, and then a couple more times when I was going up to visit my brother who was living up in Annapolis at the time. And it was crazy because the time I went, one of the times I went, okay, both of the times I went when I was older was after having played Fallout 3, and it really is crazy how well they captured the Metro system. Like in terms of at least the aesthetics of it. Yeah, I would hope that the that if anything, that they're going to start speeding up a little bit with production. I will say that, so after they released Oblivion, Fallout 3 came out 2 years later. After they released Skyrim, Fallout 4 came out 4 years later. So it's one of those things where it's like definitely the time has increased, but when you consider the fact that like they were basically rebuilding the engine in that time, my hope in between the last game and the next game, my hope is that, you know what, you're right, let's just kill. Nope. It was focusing on the flames, I guess. Let me put my weapon away and see if... Is that focusing on the Fire Ant Warrior or no? I think it's focusing on the light. Okay, I'm just gonna have to beat it to death. Man, what was I gonna say? Okay, so the fact that they've spent as much time as they have building the engine out for Starfield, I'm hoping that it's gonna end up being generally the same engine they use for Elder Scrolls 6 and for Fallout 5. And so I'm hoping that what'll happen is that the production schedule in between now and those games will be much reduced. The amount of time it takes them in. Well, yeah, I mean, they've been using a version of Gamebryo. Oh, jeez. Since Morrowind at the very earliest. Or very latest, I mean. Yeah. No, yeah, moving platforms was a problem. I remember one of my first great disappointments when I was playing Oblivion was I was walking around the city of Cheydinhal, and it started to rain. And I walked under the eave of a building, and rain was still coming through the roof, and I was just like, oh, that's disappointing. Yeah. Well, and so we'll see exactly what it is that they do in terms of... Because they've now got 3 tent poles that they are working on, and they work on in a cycle, I assume. I don't know my preferred way of how they do it. Because it seems to me that the way they're doing it right now is kind of crazy, to where it's now been 12 years. Well, it will have been 12 years by this November since the last release of an Elder Scrolls game. And it's like, it's still going to be at least another couple, maybe 3-4 years before they release Elder Scrolls 6. It's one of those things, I would love it if they would basically have 3 separate teams. And I'm not saying that these people would have to be on these teams, like, permanently, but if it was one of those things where you could kind of cycle between teams, and they would basically be working on the games simultaneously, I think that'd be pretty great. Or at least work on a couple games at a time, rather than just one, and then have it take a decade to get to the next one. Where would you all like to see Fallout 5 take place? I have my personal preference, living in Texas, that I'd love to see it take place in the Austin area. Have some enormous armadillos. Have some giant blind salamanders crawling out of the aquifers. But that's just me. Plus, Austin has, I mean, during the Cold War, it had an Air Force base. We've got missile sites out west of town that were active during the Cold War. There's William Brandeis, that's right. Yeah, Fallout in Memphis, Tennessee, New Egypt. Yeah, near the borders would be an interesting thing to do, because you would see the difference between the U.S. and the other country. Especially if it was between, like, the U.S. and Canada. Simply because when it comes, like, with the U.S. Whoa.
Will you
There's
stop?
Dr. Lesko.
You really mustn't.
Creep up on you. I just crap my pants, for crying out loud.
That's no way to talk to a man of science. I don't have time for this kind of childish nonsense. I have some very delicate experiments that I must attend to.
You call this a laboratory?
I've chosen this room as a temporary retreat from which to contemplate my erroneous figures for my experiments. It may be a bit dark and damp, but such annoyances will not stand in the way of science.
Experiments? What do you mean?
My experiments are of a complex nature and would take a scientist to explain. Oh, wait! I'm a scientist!
Oh,
How
Lord.
marvelous! My foray into reducing the girth of these insectoid creatures is of utmost importance. I intend to generationally reduce their immense stature by way of a pre-birth induced mutagen. Isn't that clever?
Oh, I see you're trying to make them smaller over time by injecting the eggs.
My word, you understand perfectly. How marvelous!
Let's see. I got news for you, Brainiac. It ain't working. That's great.
I don't expect a common wastelander to understand the intricacies of an experiment this delicate. There was an error in my calculations that caused my mutagen to allow the ants to develop a new biomechanism. I call their genetic aberration pyrosis, the ability to emit flame from their bodies. I may be able to correct this error, but I can't get near my equipment.
Make a note of that real quick. Pyrosis is what he calls it. Because we've actually seen this mutation before in the Fallout universe. Specifically, we've seen it in Fallout 76. And technically, the events of that take place before this, but of course the game didn't come out until 10 years after this. But that's when they created Fire Wolves in Vault 96. Let's see. I'm shocked you didn't attempt this in a controlled environment first.
Your knowledge of experimental procedure surprises me. Indeed, I have skipped a step and directly modified an entire brood. Perhaps I was too hasty. I was so certain it would work. To correct this mistake, I'll need to get to my terminal to modify the mutagen.
What can I do to help?
Since you've offered, allow me to elaborate. My portable terminal is set up in the hatchery chamber near the Ant Queen. If I can reach it, I can continue to work on improving the mutagen.
If the Queen's your concern, why not deal with it directly?
If she were harmed in any way, months of data would be lost. Your objective would be to eliminate what I call her quintet of nest guardians. Filthy little abominations.
I hope that's everything. I've had enough ants.
Yes, it should all wrap up rather nicely. I've rigged my equipment at my portable terminal to emit what I call an inhibitor pulse. Once I
That's
set...
enough of you. Fork over some caps, Einstein. Okay. I like that you can immediately tell him, "Oh, I'm done," and he's like, "What? No, you haven't. You've just been standing here." Let's see what you all have said here. Let's see. Seattle with Vancouver would be interesting, definitely. Fallout in France. That would also be. I really would like to see at the very So I think the best way to do this, because I think Night Spearhead is kind of right that you got to have. It's got to be at least centered in America. I think it would be great if they would do some sort of expedition system like they've done with Fallout 76, to where you could potentially go to these other countries and see a sliver of what's going on in these countries. Now I know people are playing Fallout London right now, that the mod that people have been working on there. I've not personally done it. Most of the time, I don't generally play those kind of mods, even if they're lore friendly, because I'm playing Fallout for the lore, and so if it's effectively fan fiction, it doesn't really fit into what I'm looking for, you know. But I think it would be interesting to at least see what these other countries are like and what has happened to them. Maybe get some sort of info on what things were like in those countries before the war. See how people have been doing after the fact. Let's see. Rail systems, widespread radio. Yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's kind of an expedition system sort of a thing. I've talked about this before. I'd like to see China in the Fallout universe, specifically see what's going, what was the war was like there, how the people were dealing with it, the aftermath of it with the American troops that were left behind, stuck in China. Good Lord. At least this is better than the 32. Another place that I've thought about with, and so this was like a long fan fiction. There was this guy I was having a comment chain with on a video in Fallout 76. Like, I mean, the quest chain went on for like a month, or comment chain, I mean, went on for like a month, where we were going back and forth. And this is before the Return of the Brotherhood? Wastelanders, maybe? I don't know. But regardless, basically what I ended up saying was that and so some of this stuff doesn't work anymore because of the new lore that has come out. But I wanted to see basically definitely Wastelanders was out. I wanted to see the Settlers of Foundation and the Raiders of the Crater basically unite. And along with that, have the Dwellers of 76 working together with them and basically creating the society where the Raiders become the military, the Settlers become basically the civilians. And it's not something where it's like the Raiders are like lords over the peasants that are the Settlers. No, there's like the Settlers are doing like the engineering work, the agricultural work, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it allows the Raiders to basically get their aggression out by fighting against enemies of like this new Appalachian state that comes into being that utilizes ultrasight and automation to take control of the full scope of Appalachia and spread southwest. And I was thinking like Fallout 5 could be something that takes place within the normal timeline of these later Fallout games. Later Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 being 200 Fallout New Vegas being like 205 or whatever it is, and Fallout 4 being 210 years after the bombs, to where you could even still do that and have it be the case that the people of Appalachia, this Appalachian Republic, or even to have it be like a kingdom or something like that, with all of its automation and ultrasight and stuff like that, has spread southwest and is starting to annex Louisiana. And you've got like you're like stuck in the middle between these like local factions, and then you've got Appalachia that's moving in, that's trying to conquer the territory with with all their machines and stuff like that. But I don't know. Some of that stuff kind of broke down when the Blue Ridge Caravan became a more prominent thing, and basically because part of this required that Appalachia separate itself from the East Coast and any sort of wastelands to the east and north in order to make it so that this large, automated, powerful republic would not be visible in Fallout 3, which with the Blue Ridge Caravan taking people all over the place on the East Coast, that would really not be feasible without people in Fallout 3 having known something about Appalachia, which they generally don't. So at least nothing that we get to see here in Fallout 3, other than a brief mention of Vault 76 existing that you can find within the archives of the Pentagon. Rockopolis before the downfall. That would be interesting to see. I definitely want to see more of the Mole Miner lore. I'm hoping that we're going to get more of that at some point in the future. Specifically, I would love to see the Garahan family somehow be involved with the existing Mole Miners as like some sort of like ruling faction amongst the Mole Miners, given that most of the Mole Miners seem to be wearing Garahan mining equipment. I think that'd be really cool. And plus the Garahans were actually, I think, well, up until the very end, were generally well liked by the miners because they were trying to keep them in their jobs. They do seem to have taken a bit of flack towards the end when, after the Man vs. Machine event, they started trying to rent some auto miners from Hornwright Industrial. But again, I would like to see the Garahans make an appearance with any sort of Mole Miner lore. So, all right, well, it's just about 7 o'clock, so any final questions you all have? Any suggestions, requests, stuff like that before we close things out? I do think that there will be a major Enclave story in the future at some point in Appalachia. We'll see exactly what that does. And I've also seen suggestions that Ultrasight could be the ultimate downfall of Appalachia at the same time. Yeah, I'd like to see some stuff in Ronto. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Jeffrey. I will see all of you next time, next Friday at 6. Until then, hope you all have a great weekend. Look forward to the Great Edge video on Monday. And I will see you all then. Have a great weekend, y'all.